All right. Well, I'll be right back.
Oh, okay.
Easy come, easy go.
All right. Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this live edition of Retro Serial. I am so excited to
Need my
have
rocket
all
fuel.
these fantastic guests here with me in the chat room. And so let's introduce everybody. I want to say hi to everybody in the chat first, and then I will introduce everybody. Hey, everyone in the chat, thank you for joining us. We have Tracy Roth Myers in the chat. Just bring these guys up one at a time here. Hello,
Gotcha.
Tracy. So
Hey,
glad
Tracy.
that you could be joining us. Who else do we
Hello,
have
Tracy.
in here making a ruckus? I see Spike Spikerson says, hey. Hi, Spike. How you doing? And by the way, just so everybody knows, we are doing something a little bit new tonight. I am not going to be in charge of reading the comments. Thrash Pondo Pons is going to be in charge of that. And so that way I can kind of pay a little bit more attention to the guest and the topic and stuff. And my mind's not quite as divided. Because sometimes, you're overlooking, making sure you don't want people to think that you've missed them. And then somebody says something and you miss it, So the idea of having a split mind is certainly not true in my case. I miss things. I cannot concentrate on two things at once, let alone walk and chew gum at the same time. Let's say hi to other people. Bring them on up, Thrash.
Oh, yes, sir.
All right. Well, Tracy says hi again, and then I see DJ Anubis there as well. And you're putting stars by their name. I don't know. Hi. And Terrell says hi and says, go ahead and read that for us, Thrash.
Oh, Terrell Barrelinger says, hello, Ian. Happy Monday. Before we get started, I was so shocked and saddened to hear about the news of Bob Saget's death.
Right.
He was one of the best TV dads of the Gen X millennial era.
That's
Will
certainly
be
true.
missed.
That's certainly true. All right. Well, hi, Mr. Led. Glad you could be joining us as well. And hi to everybody else in the chat room. Oh, John Collins, man.
Hey, Johnny.
Us. How you doing, Johnny?
Johnny
all right,
in
man.
the house.
That was a big echo there. All right. Well, let's introduce everybody, starting to, on my screen, my right, we have is with us always, Thrash Pondo Pons. How you doing, Thrash?
Never better, never better. I'm getting the hang of this chat.
Getting the hang of the chat. And if you click on that again, he'll come off the screen, just so you know, so you don't have to continually switch. So, and then next to Thrash Pondo Pon is no traitor to Rush, but always a Rush traitor, Anthony, who has joined us on the program to talk about the Beatles on one occasion, and he's back now to talk about the legendary guitarist of Ozzy Osbourne. Please check his channel out, Rush Traitor. How you doing, Anthony?
Great to be back with you guys.
That is awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah. Well, when I thought about this, actually everybody here are people that I thought of. When I said, you know what, I want to do one on Ozzy Osbourne guitarist, everybody in this chat room right now, and actually one more that wasn't able to make it due to work, I thought immediately this would be just a fun and awesome conversation. We're lucky we're not in the same room. It might end up in a brawl over who our favorite one is. And we also, down below me here, is Chris from Redbeard, highly opinionated, but hardly ever wrong. Chris from Redbeard,
Hardly
how are you
ever.
doing?
Damn,
hardly
never.
Ever.
How dare you short-sight me like that? I am never wrong.
Oh, never wrong. Highly opinionated and never wrong, Chris.
Hey, I am well confident in my wrong opinions. I'm okay with that.
That is awesome. You ready to talk some Ozzy Osbourne and Ozzy Osbourne's guitarist?
Yes, the most overrated singer in the history of metal. Yes.
Oh, no. We're already starting here. All right. And
Redbeard came to play.
Yes, he did. And the guy who's got the golden fingers, Pat McCormick, playing Kung Fu, playing Get Smart, and all kinds of other stuff. How you doing, Pat?
I'm doing great, Ian. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Now,
I was going to say, I just found my studio mix of Kung Fu and put it up this afternoon. So, yep, that's it for me. That's all the music.
You had another mix, didn't you? Because I'd listened to it before.
It was me playing it live. It was me actually playing it in front of the camera. That was the other. That was the other thing I did. But the studio mix is far superior than that. So I was very happy to find that.
Okay.
It was hiding from me.
I didn't know that was a new one, so I will definitely
Yeah.
give that one a listen
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah,
And give
very
Pat a
proud of it.
hand out there, everybody. As a matter of fact, Pat is like kind of on the edge of not that kind of hand. Pat is on the edge of you know, trying
Sanity.
to make it here on YouTube, but he has these subscribers, but the watch time is severely down. So go over to his channel and check it out. Make some playlists for yourself. It is well worth it. You know,
Thanks,
in a
buddy.
discussion like this, I don't know where to start. I was a big fan of Ozzy Osbourne in the 80s, of course. He was not my favorite singer, I have to admit that, but I didn't hate his voice. And the other thing is I thought his guitarists were just legendary. When I was young and I first picked up a guitar, one of the very first songs that I ever learned on the guitar was Crazy Train. Actually, the two songs that I learned on the guitar was Too Fast for Love by Motley Crue, and Crazy Train was kind of shortly after that. I was a
That's a
big
big
fan.
jump.
What's that?
That's a big jump.
It,
Like, that's
it
a
was.
big jump in ability, in my opinion, anyway.
I didn't say I did it well.
Oh, well, you know, still. I mean,
Yeah.
going for the gusto.
Yeah. I surprised a few people with that one, actually. The idea that I could play like Randy Rhodes ever, though, was a pipe dream. He was such an amazing guitarist. And I think what I want to do is I want to go around and ask everybody who, you know, maybe give me a brief synopsis of what you think Randy Rhodes' best guitarist is, and why, and maybe a synopsis of, and your favorite, and maybe a brief synopsis of what you think of Ozzy Osbourne in general. Anthony, let's start with you, sir.
Well, let's see. Well, in terms of Ozzy, I think that, of course, you know, he was there with Sabbath at the very, very beginning of metal.
Yeah.
And so he was kind of there as the blueprint. But of course, metal would go on to mean much bigger and better things, I think, than Black Sabbath. I mean, they were great, and they were, you know, but in terms of singers, I know that Chris was saying that Ozzy is not a great singer and everything, and I agree that he is not technically a great singer, but he got it done enough to get that genre off. And of course, a lot of the heavy singers that we know of, like Bruce Dickinson and Rob Halford and a lot of these other guys, they went higher. They sang very, very high, and they had a whole different presentation. And so Ozzy was kind of there in the early days, and I think his reputation probably of being just this wild character probably was the biggest thing that may have clouded everything else. It was just, and it was kind of strange because all of these people that worked with him talked about, no, he was an alcoholic and they got treated poorly, but they all wanted to rally around him and help him make the next best album, whatever that was going to be. And I think that Randy Rhodes was there at the right time to help Ozzy make those first couple of solo albums, which are pretty defining albums in terms of metal. He had a really good team with him. It wasn't just Randy Rhodes, you know, it was Bob Daisley and Lee Kerslake that was in there too. And so I think that when Ozzy came upon Randy Rhodes, it was kind of like, you know, Randy Rhodes, I think, was one of these characters. He was kind of like larger than life and almost felt like he came from another planet. And we saw this with like Jimi Hendrix and Eddie Van Halen, just skills that were off the charts. And you kind of wondered how they were doing this. Very, very different. And so I would have to say that Randy Rhodes would have been Ozzy's best, you know, guitar player, just because he was from another time, from another place. And even Ozzy knew it too. I mean, he even felt that Randy would probably not live a long time just because he was such a special, you know, just a special personality, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so he didn't think that really he was going to be around long. And it's kind of strange how these guys that we feel that are from out of this world don't stick around a whole lot, you know.
The old theory of better to burn out than to fade away.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these guys, they didn't do a whole lot, really, when you take a look at it, like Jimi Hendrix and Randy Rhodes, you know, only a handful of things that we look back on, but they were such big deals, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
So if I can just go next.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I know you've got a limited amount of time with us this evening. So Chris, if you would
it's not even just that. I just wanted to clarify. Yes, I did say that Ozzy was overrated, and that's true. It's not that I said that he's a bad singer, though. I don't think he's a bad singer. I just so in the 80s, which you all know because we all lived through the 80s, right? In metal and in rock, everything was this guy versus this guy. Steve Vai versus Eddie Van Halen. Sammy Hagar versus David Lee Roth. And the other one was, very famously and for good reason, Ronnie James Dio versus Ozzy Osbourne. And I very much was a Ronnie James Dio guy. So, and in my opinion, he buried Ozzy as a singer. However, I will say one of my very first favorite metal songs of all time is Shot in the Dark. And that whole album, Ultimate Sin, with the cover and Ozzy as the big, you know, fly and the girl on the cover and the whole thing. Like, I was a very visual type of person at the age of 10. So in terms of favorite guitarist, I would have to say, though, it's got to be Zack Wilde. And the reason why is because he changed the Ozzy game. Like, he changed up the sound. Ozzy's sound was very consistent and the same from Randy Rhodes through Jakey Lee through all that, and they're great guitarists. Jakey Lee is phenomenal guitarist, and Randy Rhodes buries most guitarists in terms of sheer ability. But in terms of changing the game and something that spoke to me as a teenager, that sound he brought with No More Tears, when I first heard that song, No More Tears, and Zack Wilde brought that crunch, that sound that Ozzy never really had, because Ozzy had a metallic sound, but you know, Zack Wilde brought that drop tuning, that heaviness. So and that was something different. So I'd have to say, even though like Mama, I'm Coming Home and all that stuff was under Zack Wilde as well, it was the Crazy Babies and No More Tears and that stuff that really stuck with me. So I'm going to go with Zack Wilde on that one.
That's awesome. I do feel you on this. I mean, one of the things was, you know, when Jakey Lee was becoming Ozzy's new guitarist, it was really, you know, who's going to replace Randy Rhodes and sound like Randy Rhodes. And Randy Rhodes, in my opinion, I don't know this for sure, I'm not a musical historian, but I know that he was, if not the first, but one of the first to kind of push classical guitar into heavy metal. As you know, it was largely blues based kind of riffs and licks that were being played, and he was one of the first ones. It should say on the cutting edge of bringing more of a classical feel to metal and making it work. And yeah, I mean, I was there when we were like, well, who's going to replace Randy Rhodes? I mean, who's it going to be? We don't know who it's going to be. And then I was there too.
When we were all Jakey Lee's stuff going forward, with Badlands and whatnot, he didn't play a lot of that Randy Rhodes type shreddy stuff. His stuff was different. It was very different. So
yeah, and his choice of Jakey who's the guy you just said?
Ray Gillen.
No, not Ray Gillen. His choice
of Zack Wilde.
Zack Wilde. I don't know why that name just skipped my mind for a minute. It was a shock to all of us. We were thinking, oh, he's going to pick somebody else who sounds like Randy Rhodes. You know, that was the standard in which we were all expecting. But with that said,
was what, 12 years old?
With that said, Pat, I know that you've got skin in the game on this. Please let me enlighten us as to all of this, because I know you have a personal story with all of this as well. So share it.
Oh man, you remembered that, Ian? Oh.
I remember you telling me.
Well, first of all your points that you guys made are totally valid. I, for one, thought that Ozzy's tone of his voice was extremely unique. if you were to ask who I liked more, him or Dio, I would always say Dio, or Halford for that matter. But Ozzy had tone, and that is something you are born with. So natural talent, and I would never take anything away from him vocal-wise. But came through the Sabbath years, set up a whole genre of music that way. And of course, they, were obviously a little off the rails most of the time. So how he survived going from that into a more intense type situation with his own band was, well, let's face it, it was Sharon. Sharon was a big part of why Ozzy got on his feet and started again. And so we owe that to her. But of course, what he did was he looked for a band. I think he may have just walked down the Sunset Strip one night, gone into Guitarists or one of the nightclubs, and caught this band called Quiet Riot, and went, "That's my band. Fire the singer." It's kind of what happened. If you know the history, that basically is what happened. And so here's Randy Rhodes out on the scene. Just an anomaly because he was so tiny. You would kind of expect to see this huge lunken in your face, but he was just this little itty bitty guy who you could barely see. He could barely get his arms around his guitar. That made this monstrous tone. And a lot of the reasons by that was the technicality. Michael Schenker, the Scorpions, they used harmonic picking in their playing to get this really, angry tone. And that is literally what the first thing is that you hear on that album, on Crazy Train, is you hear this angry tone using harmonic picking. For those of you who don't know what that is, it just makes notes explode off the fretboard. And he was a master at that, but it was almost like, wow, that's a new tone. That's a new style. That's a new, like Eddie Van Halen was new. Who is this new sounding guy? So he literally created the Randy-isms, as we used to call them, where you would know it was him. You could close your eyes, you'd know it's Van Halen. You close your eyes, you know it's Randy. And that is what really makes you special, because it's your voice. You created your own voice, and he did that.
Wow.
As far as replacing him, Jake E. Lee did not replace Randy Rhodes.
Okay. All right.
Well, in studio he did. I know where you're going with this, but in studio
Brad
he did.
Gillis.
Yes,
Brad Gillis took the gig after Randy died. And as he had told me, it was the scariest thing anybody on this planet has ever done. Because when he walked out on that stage, all he saw was people who wanted to kill him. Unfortunately, Brad is one of the best rock guitar players that ever lived. And he shut those people up so much that they made a double live album, Speak of the Devil. That's all Brad. And that's before Jake E. Lee. So he did a whole album.
One thing, Pat, I was going to say, and you might have heard this too, is I think Ozzy, before Brad went on, told him, don't screw this up. So on top of all the other stuff, you have Ozzy probably drunk out of his mind, and his ultimate boss telling him, make sure
sound
that
advice.
I look
probably
good.
Sound advice is what I would have called, because it was at that time. It was at that time. My girlfriend goes to see Sammy Hagar up in the Bay Area, and she was she was a model, a beauty pageant. She was something to look at. And of course she makes it backstage. And who does she meet? Yeah, well, I only speak truth. We have a good childhood, but
high five to Pat McCormick. Bang.
Here it is, I get the call the next day going, Pat, I think it's time for us to call it a day. Heartbroken. She was one of my loves. I met this guy. His name's Brad. By the way, he's going to be the new guitarist of Ozzy Osbourne. I'm like,
That is nutty.
You lost out to the motoring guy?
Yep. And what comes is really ironic is full
Wait,
circle.
was her name Christian? Is that
No.
Sister Christian? What happened here?
That was written by Kelly Keegy for his sister. So I actually became good friends with the guys in Night Ranger because they're from where I'm from. And Brad and I ended up living in the same building in Hollywood for a short period, and we became friends. So he's actually played on 2 of my albums, my instrumental albums. So I've got him as a guest player. But we became friends after all that. You know, hey, Brad, you don't know this, but you ripped my heart out and just tore it to shreds. And he'd be like, oh, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, you aren't the first. You're not the
Did he at
last.
least break her heart afterward? Did he at least
no.
kick her to the curb after?
No, she wasn't she wasn't the break her heartable kind, if you know what I'm
Right.
saying.
I'm
I
sure.
know exactly what you're saying.
Well,
Yeah.
Thrash, I don't want to skip you, but would you mind bringing up some of these comments as well?
No,
And then
we
if
have
you wanna
plenty of
make
comments to go
some
to, and these
comments-
guys have said everything I would have said. You guys know way more about guitarists than I do. But yeah, we need to
Okay.
get to some of these comments. I'll start with Tracy Roth Myers. Oh, and this one goes out to Red, and boom goes the dynamite. John Collins says, Bob, Robert, my friend, you have graduated. It's time for you to have your own live stream as well, my intellectually curious compadre. Gracias.
I agree.
Yes, yeah, you should. We got to get you some live streams going too.
I have a topic already too. Spike Spikeson. I've never ever even heard one of Ozzy's guitarists. I've been a musician since I was 14 and somehow never subjected myself to that abuse.
Okay, someone is an elitist. Someone
Yeah,
drinks their drinks with their fingers up like this.
something like that.
Yikes.
Like I don't even know what to say with one of that. I mean, I
Oh,
have
my
people
ears.
who totally respect Randy Rhodes as a guitarist, even if they don't like Ozzy as a musician. What else we got? Oh, go ahead.
What else we got? Okay, we got
Go. Wait.
Mr. Lynn says,
Wait.
I just want to say something. I just want to say, like, again, like, I don't like every type of music there is, right? But nothing annoys me more than people who are just too cool for the room. Like, I would never subject myself to this type of music.
Let's not, Spike. I love you. I love you, Spike.
No, come on. Seriously, though. I mean, I'm all for it. Have your opinion. That's great. Just expect the blowback that you're going to get from the dude with the microphone.
Yeah, that's true.
Thanks,
All right.
Mr. Led. That's very nice.
What did
Mr.
he
Lynn,
say?
everybody, if you haven't listened to Pat's song, do it. It is awesome.
Yeah,
That's-
it
that's
is.
Same
solid.
page, Glenn.
That's an opinion I can get behind right there.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Can't tell you how much I needed that. I appreciate it.
DJ Anubis says Jake E. Lee's newest band, Red Dragon Cartel, is some of his best work outside of Badlands and Oz.
I got to see them. I got to see Red Dragon Cartel at a little like intimate type of club setting in San Jose, California, about 5 years ago now, and it was awesome. Like I was surprised. I didn't even know what I was in for. I had not heard the music at all. Really good stuff. Really good.
Was that at Rock Bar?
Yes.
I remember Rock Bar.
Yeah, I was
That's
the
my
DJ.
area too.
I was the DJ there.
No kidding. Wow.
I have no problem saying this on the air that I openly hate with a lot of vitriol the owners of that place. So if you know them personally, I apologize. They're scumbags.
I met her. Yes, I met her once.
Yeah, she should be buried under the building. Just saying.
Her.
Well, she's the main owner, but we'll stop with the hatred anyway. You were
Tracy
lucky only to
Rothmeyer
meet her
says,
once,
I love
and you're
Sabbath's
lucky to walk out with your
Warping.
wallet. Sorry, what?
Oh, Tracy Rothmeyer says, I loved Sabbath's War Pigs.
It was a good song. Good song.
That-
Loved it.
that
I
was
liked
a
a lot
great
of what
song.
Sabbath did.
Some of the covers
And
of that song are
Spike
tremendous.
Spikerson again. I have a theory that metal was invented by the Beatles and George Harrison in particular.
Yeah, I
Which
think we
one of
talked
the-
about that on the thing that we did about the Beatles with Helter Skelter being like one of the earliest metal songs, or metal
Absolutely.
metal
Who
like
wrote Helter
songs.
Skelter? Which one of them wrote Skelter?
I thought that was a McCartney piece. Generally, if he sings it, it's his. So
And
I'm
Trey
going
Throws
with
Miles
that.
goes
Or it
on
might
to
have been
say,
both.
It could have been, yeah.
I look at Helter Skelter as punk.
I could see it. I could see it.
A
It's
rendition.
got more of
could
a
be
metal
done.
vibe to me, but I could see it too.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And let's see, Terrell Bellinger says, can you believe that this year marks 20 years since Osbourne's reality show made its debut on MTV? It helped pave the way for the Kardashians, Real Housewives, Jersey Shore, among others.
Yeah,
Ah,
thank
but
you
I
very
have-
much
We'll
for
forgive
that.
them.
I have a trivia question though.
Okay.
It's not the Osbournes that started reality TV. Do you know what show really started reality TV? It's another MTV show.
I don't know. What? You got which one?
What, the real world?
World.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
the
the
real
real world.
Yeah, I was going to guess, yeah.
Yeah, when they stopped playing music and they started
Yeah.
playing
Well, it
some other
wasn't
things.
that time. It was about 10 years after that. But yes, that was the beginning of the end.
Yeah, well, that was basically MTV trying to find something that they can play that will give them ratings. You know, it wasn't
Sadly,
music.
terrible.
It was terrible.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Somebody knew in
Mr.
the,
Bellinger again. Randy Rhodes was the best. Gone way too soon. Founding guitarist for Quiet Riot, as Pat just mentioned earlier.
Pat just said, yes, he did.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna put the comments on hold for just. We'll do this last one from Mr. Led. Let's
Oh,
put it
okay,
on hold,
sure.
And I've got another. I have another question for our guests to answer.
Certainly. Mr. Led says, I used to watch Ozzy just for laughs because you couldn't understand a word he was saying, but it got old real quick for me.
I don't want no air bubbles. Sharon, no bubbles.
Did you see that Saturday Night Live skit where they don't know what he's saying? They're in the studio. I can't remember who's playing him, and they're like, "All right, we're gonna break for lunch. What do you want? What does everybody want?" And then they're like, and the guy's playing Ozzy Osbourne's like, "Well, I wouldn't ask to have the." And they're like, "What do you want?" And it's like, "Okay, just sing it into the microphone." He's like, "I want some ham and cheese." We're like, "Okay, we've got it. Now, do you want fries or chips?" And then,
Iron,
it was
Iron
almost-
Man,
almost-
huh?
yeah.
Yeah, it was almost like all the time. Like when I was a kid, I never understood why Jeff Tate had this from Queensryche had this super low, deep, regular American voice, and then he'd sing, he'd sound high and British. I'm like, what happened?
Yeah.
Like, what's going on?
All right, I need to know this question. So, favorite Ozzy Osbourne album and why? Favorite Ozzy Osbourne album and why? Let's start. Thrash Pondo, why don't you go ahead and start us off with this one?
I'm racking my brains to try to see. When I was a kid, at that time, I was mostly going with the 45s and stuff. So I'm racking my brains. Whichever album Crazy Train is on, I can't for the life of me think of it off the top of my head. Anyone?
Blizzard.
Blizzard
Thank
of
you.
Oz.
Blizzard of Oz.
Blizzard of Oz. Okay, thank you. I would have to go with that one.
And why?
Just because it rocked. I was 13 years old. I was just starting to get into heavy metal. It was sort of, I wouldn't say I was in the top 40. I was more into like oldies when I was a kid. Old Motown, of course the Beatles, that type of thing. But the first music that kind of was my own, that I hadn't inherited from my parents, was heavy metal. And that started with Black Sabbath and Blue Oyster Cult and stuff like that. So it was a very important time for me. And of course, Ozzy Osbourne was so notorious. That was right around the time the whole Bat story was making national news. And do you know how many cities actually claimed that story took place in their city? I grew up on Cape Cod, and we did have a venue down there. Everyone said, "Oh yeah, that happened on Cape Cod. That happened on Cape Cod." No, it happened in New York. No, it happened in San Francisco. It actually happened in, and I'm sure you guys already know this, it was Des Moines, Iowa, of all places, if I remember correctly. I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong. But I just remember as a kid that everyone claimed it was right here on Old Cape Cod that happened. So I think the timing was most influential of everything else going on.
Let's go to your right, or I don't know, my right. I don't know who everyone else is, but Anthony, if you had to pick, if you were stranded on a desert island, somebody said, or they threw you in prison, and they said, okay, you get to choose one Ozzy Osbourne album and one only, and what would it be?
I'd have to go with Blizzard of Oz. Crazy Train, that whole time. I mean, you know, that whole album, it took Ozzy to another, you know, like another level. He was with a whole new player who opened his world, knew how to work with Ozzy, even though Ozzy had like a limited range, as we talked about. The team that worked with Ozzy knew how to use whatever he had to make a defining album for the 80s in terms of metal. You know, the playing on that album and the songs, to think that Ozzy could do something that would stand right up with Black Sabbath was kind of like you were kind of scratching your head, because Ozzy left Black Sabbath kind of in like a disgrace. You know, it was kind of drugged out. They threw him out of the band because he just wasn't able to do anything. And then he pops up and he's got a defining metal album in the 80s, and he put together a couple of them like back to back. So those first two albums were very, very strong, and I'd have to go with the first one. Definitely Blizzard.
Yeah, those two are neck and neck. And what you're saying about, you know, whether or not Ozzy was going to survive outside of Black Sabbath was, you know, a big question. And of course, he comes out swinging for the fences. All right, Redbeard, let's hear what you got to say. If you were thrown into a jail cell and they said you get one Ozzy Osbourne album, which one's it going to be? They might not be the only album you get, but only one Ozzy Osbourne album. Which one would you choose?
I mean, it's something Thrash Pondo said that sparked it in me, is that, like, for me, Ozzy's not an album guy. Like, he's always been, like, his hits are hits. Like, the songs that were big songs were killer songs. And I could only think about it that way, except for the two albums that I listened to regularly, which were the two that I mentioned in the beginning, which were No More Tears and The Ultimate Sin. And the only other one I could think of would be Bark at the Moon. But upon analysis, if I had to be thrown in jail with one album, it has to be Blizzard of Oz, because that's got all the killer songs on it. I Don't Know, Crazy Train, Goodbye to Romance. I mean, every Suicide Solution, Mr. Crowley. I mean, every song is a banger. Every song is a banger on that album. So, I mean, for nothing having to do with the guitarist, because Thrash Pondo's complete analysis matches mine. Time and space. Zack Wilde's my favorite Ozzy guitarist during the Ozzy period, because No More Tears and what it did for that. But if I'm comparing albums, Blizzard of Oz buries all of them without question.
Interesting. All right, Pat, up to you now. Let's see if we get a clean streak here. 100%. You were thrown into prison and they were allowed.
First he talks about his hot girlfriend, and he starts playing guitar.
I know.
Put your dick out next.
I can air guitar.
There you go. There's my
Crazy.
answer.
There's your answer.
But that's how it
Awesome, man.
goes.
Can you play the solo?
Where's my lighter? I need my lighter.
I got the solo down, man. My guitar's over there, but it's only an acoustic. My electric's not plugged in. But,
That was what was so great about Randy, is it was just as fun playing his chord progressions as it was his
yes.
soloing.
Yeah,
Oh, God,
yeah.
that riff
I
is
mean, his
insane.
chord progressions
'Cause
were off the hook, man.
They were what we called adult metal. Adult metal. You
adult
must be an
metal.
adult to be able to play this and like it. And so, yeah.
Oh,
Definitely
I don't know.
Blizzard. Blizzard was, was the one that started it. And I mean, I've been a fan of his. I'm not like a rabid fan, and I've never seen him live, but I can tell you, that influenced me a lot. And I also wanted to say real quick that I just discovered in a documentary, another friend of mine, Dave Meniketti, almost became the guitarist for Ozzy after Randy died.
Y&T, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
He was being courted by Ozzy and Sharon, big time. They wanted him, and for
Great
good
guitarist.
reason, because Dave is just a monster player, even better singer, which is I think why
Great
he
singer.
didn't go. He didn't do it because he wanted to have his own voice. But that would have been amazing.
Yeah, do you think he passed up an opportunity there, or what? Or do you think
No, because it would have watered him down. Now, here's the thing. Brad took it, and this was before Night Ranger had their deal. And Ozzy knew that Night Ranger, I think they had their deal, but they hadn't recorded the album yet, Dawn Patrol. Well, it's a good thing that Ozzy didn't get in the way of that thing, because that, to me, is one of the best guitar albums ever made. The initial Night Ranger album was just like, so that it dug that stake into my heart a little further once their album came out, and it's just like, yeah, and he'll never be the guitar player he is, Pat. Put something back to me, please.
Why did Gillis not play on the next album? What happened there? What was the behind the scenes?
Night Ranger.
He wanted to do Night Ranger instead?
Oh, man, yeah, and for good reason. I mean, that was a super group. Ozzy was almost like a hired hand group, especially after Randy left. It was simply, you got to sound like this guy. So you're a hired hand. You're a side man. The group of side man. Ozzy was the star. With Night Ranger, all of them were the stars.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard people talk about there's the guitar players that worked for Ozzy and the ones that worked with him. Big difference.
And Zack worked
Randy
with
worked more with him, right, as there was more of a team. And I had even heard, and maybe you know something about this, Pat, that originally it was to be called the Blizzard of Oz. The actual band it wasn't going to be an Ozzy thing. But then, as we talked about earlier with Sharon and everything, they started to say, no, this is an Ozzy thing. And everybody's going to work for him. And then all the stuff that came after that with Sharon and the record deals and the contracts and all that stuff, and that all went nuts. But a shame how that all worked out.
The argument is that Jakey Lee was probably the best replacement, and that's how I feel. All you got to do is watch the US Festival. Find the Ozzy performance on the US Festival, and it's Jake. And the performance that he gives on that it's perfect. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh my God, he's doing other stuff that I really like too. The double hit notes. He'd take what would be a regular ba 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 ba, and he'd go and it was so cool. I mean, I was just, wow, that guy is amazing.
That's
cool. Jakey Lee's a beast.
Zack, I don't think of as a monster player. I think of Zack as a monster performer. And he does a few things that makes you know it's Zack. One being the low-end, thick harmonic, woo! You'll hear that come out of him. And it's like, oh, that's Zack. But watch him on stage, and you're like, you watch him on stage, and you're like, oh, that guy's a star, man. No doubt about it.
Yeah, very, very much larger than life. I mean, I remember when they replaced him, I was not thrilled with it when they replaced him. And the reason why I wasn't thrilled is it did take such a turn in his music. And I was really just, and that really says more about me at the time, because I was just, I didn't want anything new. I was just like,
you mean when they replaced Zack Wilde?
No, when they replaced Jakey Lee with Zack Wilde, the music was so different. And one of the things that bugged me the most, you're not going to believe this, one of the things that bugged me the most about this whole thing was his haircut. I mean, his haircut on No Rest for the Wicked was just, I was just like, what is this? Awful. Is this my grandmother? He looks like he could have walked off instead of the Golden Girls with that thing. Good. No, I know.
Look at him now. Look at him now. He probably looks at himself back then and he's like, what was I thinking?
I always thought of Farrah Fawcett when I saw him. It's like, wow, he's the Farrah Fawcett of rock guitar.
Better legs.
So speaking of it, so I was doing research earlier before this, because this is what I do. Do you know who was supposed to replace Zack Wilde after he left?
No.
Steve Vai.
Oh, really?
Steve Vai was on Osmosis. He was supposed to be one of the people to replace, which would have been, I don't know, interesting.
Right.
I don't know.
Along those lines, do you know who would have gotten the gig if Jake had not gotten it?
No, who? Well, I don't know.
George Lynch.
I heard that too.
According to
that's right. I remember
according
this
to
now.
Jake, Lynch found out that he didn't get the gig right in front of Jake when he found out that he was getting it. Ozzy asked
Oh,
Jake,
jeez.
do you want to get the job? And Jake was like, well, yeah, sure. And George is standing right there. And that's when he found out. Ozzy was like, take a hike. So I've heard a lot of stories from
Take a hike,
just
but
how-
leave your girlfriend. That's
Right.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Take a hike, but you leave the
they
girlfriend.
fired people. The Osbournes fired people very
Oh, yeah.
coldly. Like you were
Yeah.
talking about the US Festival. Jake was talking about whoever the bass player was at that particular time. He brought his family to the show. Right. This is the US Festival, a huge show. The bass
Tucson?
player brings his family and
Greg Susan or
Well,
something like that.
was it
no,
Randy
I think the
Sarzo?
guy's name was
it
Tony,
Sarzo?
maybe. Or, I
wasn't
forget the
Sarzo?
guy's name. No,
I
No,
thought
be-
Sarzo actually played that gig with him.
it wasn't Sarzo. It was someone that I didn't recognize the name right off. But
Interesting.
he was told at the US Festival that you no longer have the gig, and he was there with his family and all of that. And Daisley was actually there to pick up the
Daisley,
slack.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they just have this way of firing you and letting you go and telling you that you have no rights to publishing. They just do it right in your face and they don't care. That's just how they operate.
That's
Well,
how
I heard-
everybody operates.
I heard something that was if you look at Ozzy Osbourne, the Bark at the Moon album, and the Ultimate Sin, Jakey Lee gets no credits, I mean it's really just
Yeah.
Ozzy Osbourne, and I
He
heard
gets credit on.
That's-
He gets credit on Bark at the Moon for the song
Yeah, I would
specifically.
hope.
Bark at the Moon.
well
For the song specifically, I'm not sure about the rest of the album, but for that song specifically, he does.
oh did he okay
Yeah,
because
He may get-
that sounds right.
Credit now, but I mean back in the day, his name wasn't on the album.
oh
They-
really
kidding.
They told him that he was going to get it, and they told him what he was going to get, but it wasn't in writing. That's the key with the Osbournes. If it's not in writing, it never happened.
yeah
So they presented him. I think he says that he got paid $5,000 to do that song or to do that session, and it should have been like 200,000 or something from what he was saying. Like it should have been way more.
Right.
And instead of giving him 5, they actually gave him 10, but they didn't give him the publishing and all of that. That was kind of the trade-off. But and
Yeah,
they told him
there's-
basically, look, if you want to sue us, get in line. If we'll get someone else to come in here and do your guitar parts, and you can go back and sulk and sue and all that. It's just really mean.
And
How
keep
they
your girlfriend
treated
while
him.
we're at it.
Yeah.
yeah
That really stung.
Always comes back to that, doesn't it, Pat?
You have no idea. Oh God.
let's get to some of these comments and then
Can
everybody
I ask one question before we move forward with the comments?
oh
please?
sure
Anthony was just talking about how a well-known fact that Ozzy was let go because of his chemical dependency, but he still claims that his drug and alcohol usage was no worse than anyone else in the band at the time, and that it was more personalities. Can anyone shed any light on that, or is that just him trying to cover up his own demons?
Well,
I mean,
they
I
were
would just
definitely
guess-
all messed up.
Yeah, I mean, I would guess it's just if you ever watch those old live performances, it was a matter of who could hold their shit together better under the influences.
Right.
And Ozzy's were very well affected, whereas, and I also think, if I remember correctly, a few of them, I think Geezer was one of them, like they kind of wanted to stop doing that stuff. And so that's when like Dio came in, and Dio didn't do that stuff. So like it made sense for them, to bring that kind of guy in. So that's the only information I have, which is based on just stuff that I've read and heard, that they wanted to slow down doing that. Ozzy would let it affect his performances, and it just went from there. So
Yeah.
before we do move further, also, I have to bail out, gentlemen. But before I do go, I just want to say, I want to make a mention of Gus G, who hasn't gotten mentioned on this show yet, who is like the current guitarist, I guess, or one of the current guitarists. His band Firewind kills. He comes from like a progressive power metal background, and awesome. Gus G is awesome too. Not one of my favorites. I really don't like any of the Ozzy music of the past 20 years, I would say, but he's a great guitarist anyway, so he's phenomenal. And thank you for having me on, as always.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. Good to see you again,
guys
my
are
friend.
always awesome. Yes, we'll talk soon.
You too.
Thank you.
All right, and then feel free, guys, to jump in on any of these comments as well. So when these comments come in, fire away. Thrash, take us through some of these comments.
Okay, DJ Anubis says, "No Rest for the Wicked is my fave Oz record."
It is a strong album.
Yeah, for me, like I said, it took a turn. Like for me, the turn was a little too drastic. I think everybody in that late 80s, when did that come out? Did that come out in like 88, 87?
I think it was, yeah.
87 or 88. I think people were feeling that there was going to be a change in music and they just didn't know kind of what it was. But I do think that he was, yeah. Well, I think that he was, just doing some new stuff. He didn't want to do stuff that sounded like everything else that he did. And I appreciate that. But for me, it just kind of fell. I mean, I still liked it, and I still bought the albums, but it wasn't in heavy rotation. I was still going back and listening to the Jakey Lee and Randy Rhodes era stuff, more often than not. What did you guys think of No Rest for the Wicked?
I feel the same way. Just what you just said.
Yeah.
I thought the songs were good. I thought that Roy Thomas Baker I don't know, the mix was kind of weird. I never liked the way it sounded, but I thought that the songs were pretty good. And I think it stands up still. As somebody was saying before, Ozzy's not really known for having strong albums, except for maybe the first one or the second one. But I think that this particular one is an album that has a lot of good songs on it, much like The Ultimate Sin.
Did you guys like the duet with...
Go ahead. No, let's go ahead, Pat. Yes.
Did you guys like the duet with Lita Ford?
Yeah, I liked it.
Forever.
I liked it.
I thought that was a great tune.
Yeah, I thought it was good.
At the time, no, I didn't like it.
Yeah.
I wasn't a Lita Ford fan. I still aren't, but I don't know. At that time, I just thought it was very odd, very strange, but it worked for him. It worked, yeah. Yeah,
I think it did more for Lita Ford than it did for Ozzy Osbourne.
It was supposed to.
Yeah,
and it worked.
Trey Thomas Myers says, "David Lee Roth is my cousin for real. Sammy Hagar's mine."
Really? Wow, really? Really? No, so for real, she's
for real,
her
she's
cousin. You're joking. She's
I'm joking. She's for real. I'm joking.
Yeah.
The question is was David Lee Roth done? Like I see that he canceled some of the few shows that he had left. He said that they were his final shows, but then he said that he would do some more for charity. I don't know, Tracy. If you ever hear that it's not over or it is over, let us know. But I think it's over.
I got to open for David Lee Roth twice in my hometown.
That's awesome.
And it was hands down. First of all, it was an incredible thrill to be able to do that because he has a built-in audience. But he put on the best show. We were just blown away at how great he was, and so I just wanted to add that. And a nice guy too. If you can believe that, he was a nice guy too. So
when was that?
Nice to you.
That would have been, I want to say, first decade of the 2000s, probably 2004 or 5. And he was cruising around with Atomic Punk, which was a tribute band as his band. And they played the stuff verbatim. And they did every song off the first 3 albums. It was just, your face, you walk away from those concerts, your face is purple from smiling so much. Wow. That was the effect. And right there, it was a 900-person club, so you got him up close and personal. And it's real Jack he drinks too. The real Jack. That's the real stuff.
It's real Jack, huh?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. All right.
Terrell Bellinger says, fun fact, Kevin DeBrow, late Quiet Riot
DeBrow.
singer, was brother and brother-in-law to reality stars Dr. Terry and Heather DeBrow of the Real Housewives fame.
That's
Wow.
interesting.
I'll go with that.
Small world, still would hate to paint it.
DJ Newman
Here's the
says,
trouble.
Dia was always more versatile, but Ozzy was more unique in terms of vocals.
Yeah, I
agree.
can get behind that. I think. Go ahead, Anthony. Let's.
I
hear
was
it.
just going to say, it's just amazing to me how Ozzy turns out to be like the most lovable. Like, there's just something about him, like as crazy as he is and as alcoholic and as demented, or you can't understand him, or whatever it is that you find fault with him. I don't know. It just seems like everybody wants to help him, like I was saying before, and a lot of people love him. Like they just see him as this character that they hope lives forever, you know. Whereas someone like Dio, obviously better when it comes to pretty much everything, can write songs, great singer. Really, I think he elevated Black Sabbath to a whole nother level when he came in and everything. But Ozzy is the one that always gets the love and the and the accolades, and it's really interesting how that kind of works out. You know, it's not always about being the most talented or the best singer. You know, there's other factors that play in, and Ozzy has them.
Yeah,
know.
that show definitely made you feel sorry for him. They played
The show
off that.
really, yeah. Plus, the show kind of introduced him to a lot of people too, in
Yeah.
a way that we'd never seen before. I mean, when I was a
Right.
kid, if you had told me that this guy that I'm looking at on the cover of Blizzard of Oz is going to have a TV show in prime time on MTV or something, I
That'd
would
be
have
funny.
thought you were crazy. Like, what happens in this world where Ozzy Osbourne is like Bill Cosby or something? But that show really did help connect him with a lot of people who probably thought that he was the devil, you know.
Right.
He really, that it's just, you know, but it was a kind of a double-edged thing, because he was going through a lot of really bad times when his show is on, and we're sitting there watching him, you know, falling over and stumbling over his words and everything, and everybody's laughing about it. It's just so many contradictions with Ozzy that happen to work in his favor, you know, like him even being alive. Like, how does that happen?
Right,
I don't know. He's Ozzy.
Yeah. Well, I have to admit, though, that I was not necessarily a Dio fan. I mean, it wasn't my jam. I have to admit, Dio was probably a better singer than Ozzy. And yeah, as far as original material, lyrically, he was deep for sure. But I just felt that there was not that hook that he had in his music that didn't draw me in. And of course, I think a lot of that had to do with Ozzy's guitarist. Would we really even be talking about this if he didn't have the guitarist he had? I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's an alternate universe, but quite honestly, I really feel like Blizzard of Oz put him on the map, said, hey, I can do it without Black Sabbath. But at the same time, Blizzard of Oz isn't Blizzard of Oz without Randy Rhodes. It's all there is to it. You can't just have somebody else in there playing that. I mean, it was really that ominous classical music that really set the tone of Blizzard of Oz in my opinion. You know, that Mr. Crowley, you know, it was those riffs along with Ozzy's unique voice, not fantastic but unique, that really put Ozzy on the map, in my opinion. I don't know if he could have done it without Randy.
Yeah, and I'd have to add in Bob Daisley too was a major songwriting factor that stayed with Ozzy till I think like No More Tears. He was still writing for him. Ozzy has surrounded himself with a lot of great people, and Sharon made sure of that. I think Sharon is the one who's really pulling the strings and made a lot of things happen for him, and it's all worked out in his favor, really. You know, he's had a really good team with him.
He used to say, people keep throwing these success grenades at us. That's one way to look at it, Ozzy. Because we're not trying to do anything. Next thing you know, it's a success grenade. Take cover.
Yeah, I could use a few of those in my life.
Yeah.
Please
One
throw
would be
some my
just
way.
fine. Our firecracker version would be fine, you know? Jeez. Amazing.
Trey Throsmeyer says, I love the Scorpions.
Ah, yeah.
Yay.
Yeah, for sure. They were a good band. Thoughts, guys?
Great subject.
I was never a huge Scorpions fan, but I do remember them in the early days as being one of the first metal bands I remember seeing, like on MTV or any of those types of channels. You just seeing them along with, let's say, Quiet Riot and those types of bands, because there really wasn't a lot of metal in the early 80s. It was kind of starting, and when I mean metal, I mean on like the mainstream, topping the charts kind of thing.
Right.
And Quiet Riot blew the doors open on that.
Right.
And the Scorpions were not far behind there.
Yeah. And then you worked your way all the way up to Skid Row, who pushed Paula Abdul out of the #1 position in the top 40 with "I Remember You." You remember that when they did that?
Oh wow, yeah.
I was a big Skid Row fan. I don't know if you guys liked Skid Row or not, but I was a big fan of Skid Row. I know it was a little later in the whole metal genre. Go ahead. What else we got? Thrash.
Okay, we got DJ Nuba says, yeah, but Pat, you got the last laugh because Brad never lasted. Laugh out loud.
No, he went on to better things.
Well, if you want to look at it that way.
Oh, come on. You got to be a glasses half full kind of person, Pat. Come on.
The irony was that I ended up becoming friends with him. And so he is just a sweet guy. Oh, man, could he play. He would hit a harmonic on his guitar, a harmonic note, and then just grab the bar and play a melody with the vibrato bar.
Oh, really?
Not even finger anything. It was just with the bar. That much command was just unbelievable.
Sounds talented. I actually have to admit that I did not know. I mean, I knew about the live album "Speak of the Devil," but I didn't know that it came out after Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman. I actually didn't know that until just tonight. I really thought, and of course, when you think you know something, you don't look it up. You're like, oh, I know that. You know, I actually thought that was before those, that he did that, and then when he went into the studio, he was. But yeah, I guess it actually came after. So I listened to that album.
Most of it's Black Sabbath on that album.
Yes,
but there are some off the songs.
I was just going to ask you if Brad ever made any kind of mention about why there were no Ozzy solo songs on the album that came out. It was all Sabbath, and I think I had read that he actually preferred that it was more of a Black Sabbath tribute, really, than trying to replicate Randy Rhodes.
It was probably to save his ass from being killed by the audience. You know, It's like, don't you even touch this wound. Because that's what it was. It was an open wound. And it would have been terrible for him to just launch into, what was obviously Randy that close to the tragedy. It's just, yeah, I'm glad they did that, to be honest, for his sake.
Yeah.
Mr. LED says, she pulled up my Sharona on you, Pat.
Yes, she did.
Right on.
Old wounds. Speaking of old wounds, Terrell Bellinger says, after Ozzy left Black Sabbath to go solo, was fired or did he quit? They brought in the late great Ronnie James Dio in an attempt to recreate the magic.
Yeah.
I thought those were great albums.
Yeah, well, I know that when Ronnie James Dio toured later on with Sabbath, they called it they didn't call it Black Sabbath.
Yeah, Heaven and Hell or something, or was that the name of the album?
That was the name of the album, but I think
that was both.
But they didn't call them Black Sabbath when they toured with Ronnie James Dio, so that's kind of weird, I guess. You lose the name.
Yeah, well, they changed the name like later when they had their later reunion. Back in the day, when Ronnie James Dio, of course, it was Black Sabbath. But when they reunited, in order to confuse it with the Ozzy Osbourne thing. They just decided to call it something else, which is probably fine, because really it is something else. It's something totally different with Ronnie James Dio.
Right on. We got other. Who's your least favorite Ozzy? Oh wait, go ahead. Let's do John Collins, and I'll ask another question.
John Collins says, "My aunt Sally and I would always play Crazy Train, and I don't know at the top of the speakers in the car when I was in my formative, moody, teenage angst days."
Wow. Well, those are
Well said.
Yeah, riddled teenage angst songs. I have to admit that I don't even know. The new Guitarist and the new Ozzy of the last 20 years. I don't think I've heard one song. I think I really stopped with. What was the second album that he did with Zack Wilde? Do you know? Do you remember? No.
Second album?
Yeah, the second album that he did. I remember that there was the Breakout album that he did. Everyone was on edge. I mean, who's he going to choose? Who's he going to choose? What's it going to sound like? What's it going to sound like? And is it going to be comparable to? I mean, I think. I
don't know. What was that the whole No More Tears thing? Because I know that No Rest was the late '80s, and No More Tears was the early part of the '90s.
Yeah.
So I would imagine it must have been close, or that actually might have been it.
No More Tears. But for me, it definitely goes Randy Rhodes, Jakey Lee, and Gillis, and then Zack Wilde. Zack Wilde would be last for me, not because he's a bad guitarist or anything like that, but just by that time, I just wasn't on board with. I just wasn't on board with what he was doing. And I was getting out of it anyway. So, what about you guys? If you had to rank the guitar, and then the last one would be whoever the guy is now that I couldn't even tell you who he is.
Well, there really isn't one guy now. I mean, the last album had Andrew Watt, who was like a young guy, who was in a different. He was in a couple of different bands, but Andrew Watt, I think it was, but he's actually working with Ozzy on the upcoming album that he's working on. But the next album is going to have multiple people, like Eric Clapton is on it, and and Zach is on it, and a few others I can't remember. But there's going to be like that's basically Ozzy. What we've been talking about is actually we're at the point now where Ozzy's getting a lot of help in a lot of different areas. He has a professional songwriter that comes in and kind of helps with the melodies and helps with the lyrics, and he's got multiple like guitar players helping him out. He's got Chad Smith from the Red Hot Chili Peppers on drums, and I know we had Duff McKagan on the last album on bass, and they would just come in and they would basically write the songs. And Ozzy would come in and say like, yeah, that sounds good, or I don't really want to do that, and how about we do this? And they would basically work up the album for him. He'd come in and do some vocals, and that's basically Ozzy Osbourne now,
Well, we're going to go one last question, unless there's some real stuff happening in the chat room. But I do want to know this. I am interested in your guys' opinion on this. If you could have chosen a guitarist for Ozzy Osbourne, who would it have been, and at what period would you have placed that guitarist in? So I'm not going to say who would replace Randy Rhodes or who would replace Jakey Lee, but if you could choose one guitarist and you could stick them into Ozzy's, career at any point, who would you choose and when?
Shall we start with me?
Sure, go ahead.
I would pick Pat.
Pat McCormick, yes.
Pat McCormick. I would put Pat McCormick in there.
Yeah.
I passed the audition.
That'd be great, Pat. That'd be awesome.
Well,
that'd be cool. So if you couldn't choose Pat, though, who would you choose?
Oh, yeah. We're going to plan B's? Oh, let's see. With Ozzy?
Yeah.
Oh.
Man, that's a tough.
I was going to say it's a tough call again because I was more into the R&B sound, which none of them would really go with Ozzy.
Right.
So I'm going to stick with Pat McCormick.
All right. Rush Trader. Let's Anthony. You take us the next one, and I'm interested in hearing Pat's opinion too. But I mean,
who
would you choose?
Eddie Van Halen would have been a cool. I mean, if we're going to talk about, because as I said earlier, Randy Rhodes was like out of this world kind of guy. Like you take a look at him, and he just doesn't seem like he's from this planet. And there's not a lot of guys like him. You know, Hendrix, Eddie Van Halen. You know, I would like. It would have been interesting to hear Eddie Van, even though he's not a metal player. It would have been interesting to have heard his approach and his tone and his style working with someone like Ozzy. I mean, it sounds really strange, but I would want to pair him up with somebody who had no kind of limits, you know, and that would have been interesting. But that's a really a tough one, though.
That is a tough one. That is a tough one. I'm interested, Pat, please, as somebody who comes from that guitar world, what would you say? We got you vote one. We got Eddie Van Halen, Anthony's vote. Who would you say? And well, wait, I forgot to ask you though. Wait, we got to stop. When would you have put him in there? At what point would you have said you would have pulled out guitarist someone or in between guitarist A and B? Who, Anthony? You have to answer that too. Where would you have put? Where
the
in
easy
Ozzy's
part of the
career?
question.
Well, I mean, who follows Randy Rhodes? You gotta pop in another alien. You know what I mean? That's kind of the way I see it.
Right. Okay, so right after Randy Rhodes, you would have done that. Yeah. All right.
I would have had to put in someone that could really play like you've never seen before, who had the crunch and had that aggression and had the ability to write, you know, which Eddie has all of those. And I realize that his style doesn't match up, and we're kind of talking Fantasyland here anyway. So while we're in Fantasyland, that would be my alien pick.
I'm gonna do another one too after this. Okay, so I just thought of a second one, but Pat, I want to hear what you have to say too. If you could pick one, and where would you put them?
Well, where I would put them is not before Jake, because Jake really did a great job. So after Jake, I suppose I would put Dave Meniketti, because he would have definitely pulled it off. And I think Dimebag would have been great too, because he had that edge that Ozzy probably could have fed off really well, and he was no slouch either. So that's what I think I would have chosen if I could have. Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right.
But I would have auditioned too if I had the chance.
Right. Well, I would say for me, short of Pat McCormick, I would say that if I could, I would pick George Lynch after Jakey Lee. I would have loved to have heard that. I don't know if Bark at the Moon and Ultimate Sin would have sounded the same without Jakey Lee. I think Jakey Lee was just the man for the job for those albums. I almost couldn't picture anybody else. But I could definitely picture George Lynch instead of Zack Wilde for me, for sure. And I think it would have been a good, unique sound as well. And I think he would have been happier too. I mean, gosh, he hated Don Dokken. He can't even say anything nice about the guy. I mean, even to this day, he listens to interviews with him, and he's like, "Oh, that guy was horrible." Okay, next question. That's off the rail. Okay. Randy Rhodes doesn't die, but you have to decide after Diary of a Madman. I think was Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman, right? After Diary of a Madman, you decide. Here are his two choices. He continues with Ozzy forever, or after that he goes back to Quiet Riot, and we get to hear everything that Ozzy's done at that point. So you get to either hear everything Ozzy's done, Jakey Lee, Zack Wilde, all those albums, or you can choose that he stays and all of his albums have Randy Rhodes to this day. Which would you choose? Which alternate universe would you choose? Go ahead, anybody. I don't care.
That's an easy one. Randy, all the way, the whole time. They were a match made in heaven. Truly loved each other.
I mean, I can't underestimate enough when I tell you that Randy was an alien. I mean, there aren't many people where you look at them and say, this guy cannot be from this earth. I mean, and then you just can't pop someone in there and just say, hey, yeah, it's the same exact guy. Wow, I can't believe how. No, these are guys that you cannot pop somebody else in and get the same exact thing. And so
he's incomparable is the term. He's incomparable.
Yeah, he's the kind of guy that you want to hang on to. I mean, I can't say that about a lot of guys. There's some guys you say, well, maybe you need a fresh arm in there, but Randy was one of these guys that you want to hold on to as long as you possibly can. Because he's such an asset,
Exactly.
So I would have to go with that. And I don't know about the Quiet Riot thing. I would like to think that was a stepping stone, because I really never saw that band do anything that warranted any. I'm shocked that Rudy Sarzo is back.
I thought Quiet Riot 3 was good. Did you listen to Quiet Riot 3? That was actually in heavy rotation in my years when I was listening to that. That was after I think they got rid of Kevin though, and it was called Quiet Riot 3. And the guy had kind of a voice that was at least more akin to like a Jeff Tate, but that their guitarist, the guy who was basically, I don't want to be rude or anything, but the Asian Randy Rhodes I thought he was a pretty good guitarist personally speaking. But let's see, the deal with Randy about cutting the edge with classical music being in that. Am I accurate in that, or were there people before that? Do you know?
What do you mean? Who mixed classical?
Richie Blackmore kind of.
Yeah, well, when I was listening, if I listened to songs of that era, like right around Blizzard of Oz and stuff, and I listened to other like heavy rock or hard rock, or just when metal was kind of emerging kind of stuff, it does seem to be more bluesy and in some of its riffs and stuff. And here comes Randy Rhodes with what seemed to be more like operatic, gothic, yes. Classical music, except for with a distorted guitar, and I just wasn't hearing that anywhere else. And I just wondered,
combination.
I just wondered if was he the first one to kind of do that, or was he at least on the cutting edge, or can you think of anybody else who was doing that?
Not that I can think. Not offhand, certainly.
Not offhand.
Closest would be Blackmore, but even then, he was an innovator. There's no two ways about it. And it was just tragic that we lost him, because who knows what he would have ended up innovating, and where we would all be, So
yeah,
bummer.
He was amazing. He is the guitarist that I looked up to when I was a kid. I was like, I wanted to sing like Vince Neil, at least on the albums, and I wanted to play like Randy Rhodes. And that live tribute album to Randy Rhodes, isn't that an amazing album? I mean, I think that's an amazing album as well.
It's really a shame that we don't have really much in the way of, the whole visuals when it comes to Randy. We have very, very limited in being able to watch him, because he's really a great performer too.
Well, all right, guys, I think we're going to call it a night here. I just want to thank you so much for being with me on this chat and talking about this. Hey, everyone, you know what to do. Go to each one of these guys' channels and subscribe, and, watch their content as well. Get them up in the ratings so that, so the monetization can actually happen. I know that that's got to be frustrating. Like like what you were saying, Pat, before when we were off the air. I look at my numbers, and I'm closer to that 1,000 mark than I am even close to the 4,000 hour watch mark. I mean, even if tomorrow I got 1,000 followers, I would not be monetized, because I don't have that 4,000.
You'd have to watch a lot.
Yeah. So thank you very much. And please, what are we all doing on our channels these days? We'll start with you, Pat. What do you got going on these days on your channel?
Oh, well, like I mentioned earlier, today I have released my long lost studio mix of Kane's theme, the theme from Kung Fu. So that just came out today. I'm really proud of it. But it is not what I'm doing. What I'm doing is a more longer form videos of the classic television enthusiast, and calling it a season 4. But there's other things in the works too that I really can't talk about. I'm just hoping and praying that I'm making the right moves. Got some good people advising me, and so we'll just see. I'm not going anywhere.
Good. Well, we don't want you to go anywhere. Anthony, I saw that you've got some new videos up as well, that you had been kind of dormant for a while, and maybe I had some help with wrestling your cage a little bit and getting you to produce more videos. I don't know. I'd like to.
Well, I was about a year that I hadn't done anything. So I was always, for the past year, I got to do a new one. And then 12 months later, finally decided to get one done. So I recently put out a video that was like my best and worst of 2021. Mm-hmm. And I'm working on a new one that should be out within a week or two. So that's over on the Rush Trader channel.
Cool. And Thrash, are you still with us? Because you are frozen.
Oh, yes, I am still with you. I'm trying not to freeze. But yes, I am still here in spirit. And on my channel, I'm having some very good feedback with my ongoing series of top 10 dad jokes. People seem to eat those right up.
Yes.
Thank you. And I'm doing something. I've broken up my old cache of old vintage comics, and I'm presenting them to the YouTube fandom in what I call wretched recaps, where I take the worst of them and kind of do read-alongs. And I've been getting some very nice feedback with that. And I still have an ongoing program where all new subscribers can request a post on any subject, and I will do a post to their liking. It's just my way of saying thank you for joining the party.
All right, and I'm going to do this one last comment here from John Collins. He's posted it a few times. So it says, Queen did that mixing classic rock with classical music on Bohemian Rhapsody. That is true. Thanks for bringing that up and pointing that out. All right, everybody, you know what to do. You go to all these guys' channels, subscribe, watch their videos. And with this video and my video, please like, comment, subscribe, share on your favorite social media. And oh yeah, if you want to part with some of your hard-earned cash and help me build my YouTube mogul empire, you are welcome to do that by following the link below to our Patreon page, where you'll find 2 levels of support. The first level is the Cornflake Club. It's just a tip jar saying, hey, we like what you're doing over there. You keep it up over there at Retro Cereal. But if you want to be on the Insiders Club, that's $5 a month to be part of the Honeycomb Hideout, where you get most all videos 1 day in advance. And boy, I mean, talk about some special treatment. So please do all that for me, and it would be much appreciated. Thank you very much to all of you guys out there. You guys really mean the world to me. I always say it every week, and I really, really mean it every week. The chat is just lit up with you guys talking back and forth and making questions and stuff like that. It really makes this, I don't know, makes it feel very homey as well, and like a tight-knit family. All right,
Ian, let me play us out, okay?
Okay, you got it.
There you go.
All right, we'll see you, everyone. That was great, Pat.
Not everyone.